very wrong, in fact. Today we are dealing with Brad Stanfield, who wants to say a bunch of demonstrably incorrect things about cholesterol and various other aspects of things. So we'll put him right where he's wrong, and spoiler, boys and girls, that's pretty well everywhere. All right, Brad, off you go.
Lowering cholesterol is crucial for health and longevity, but...
False. No, it isn't. It is contraindicated for that purpose. You do not want to do any such thing. The single largest associative data set on this issue available anywhere is not actually even a peer-reviewed piece of literature. It's two independent data sets collected by two so-called respectable organisations, one of them being the British Heart Foundation, Brad, and the other one being the World Health Organization. Here is the data. It's on the screen now, and it suggests that the lower you reduce cholesterol below 220 milligrams per deciliter, the higher the incidence of mortality from all causes and also from every important sub-cause, including heart disease, Brad. This is not some piddly little study of 100,000 or so. This is well over 1 billion data points collected in 168 countries and territories around the world, Bradley. This is a massive data set. This is a very, very clear association, although not causal, because no associative data set can inform on cause and effect. What it does do is dismiss any chance whatsoever that what you have just said is correct. It dismisses that idea completely out of hand. We're done here, really. We're finished already, and your video is 3 seconds old. However, you've got another nearly 10 minutes of nonsense yet to spew forth, so why don't you do that and I'll correct you where you've got that wrong as well.
Unfortunately, most people, they aren't getting this right.
Including you, Brad, clearly.
So what is cholesterol? How and why do we lower it? And can we lower cholesterol too much?
Well, what is it? It's a very, very important component of our metabolic system, the functioning of our bodies, both metabolically as well as functionally in terms of structures and things as well. It does all sorts of things in the body, and I know Brad's going to talk about some of those things soon. What is it? It's a high molecular weight alcohol, in fact. How do we lower it? Well, we shouldn't. It's contraindicated, Brad. It's a bad idea. We should not be doing that whatsoever. The level of cholesterol in your body and in your blood are both under the control of your genes. Those genes having survived at least 4.5 million years in our current form. Those genes really know what they're doing, Brad, and young men like you with the kind of arrogance that you exhibit in these videos here do not know what they're doing remotely as well as what the genes of 4.5 million years of both positive and negative selection pressure do know. It's under control. We don't need any intervention from the allopathic medicinal community or the pharmacological community whatsoever. None. And is there such a thing as lowering the cholesterol too low? Yes. Any lowering of the cholesterol artificially is too much of doing that, and by pharmacological means even more so, because of the absolutely inescapable conclusion when you understand the mechanism of how statins work, for example, that they are a dangerous contraindicated metabolic poison. Despite what you're bought and paid for associative studies done with money from the companies that make statins might say. We'll get to that later though, Brad.
For patients that are completely new to cholesterol, I explain to them that cholesterol makes the blood sticky.
It does no such thing. That is absolute nonsense. That is false. What do I know though? I'm only a professor of cardiovascular pathophysiology, among other things, including statistical inference and pure and applied statistics, if you want to get into that later, Brad. And also human nutrition, another thing that you are absolutely not an expert in. Whoops.
And that leads to blockages in the blood vessels.
No, blockages in the blood vessels, Brad, are made up of atherosclerotic plaques, which are largely scar tissue, which can become calcified at late stage, which can become unstable and rupture, causing thrombi. None of that has anything whatsoever to do with cholesterol, Brad. Okay?
Leading to heart attacks and strokes.
Now, heart attacks and strokes are caused by atherosclerosis, Brad, not by cholesterol.
So if we lower cholesterol, we lower the chance of heart attacks.
Nonsense. That is false. Absolutely, demonstrably, completely false. There is no evidence anywhere in the literature to suggest that that is so. That is a ridiculous claim. That is a cause and effect claim. It requires an experiment. Do you have an experiment with human beings conducted under proper observation and control, under lock and key in metabolic wards for multiple decades, Brad? Do you have such a study? If so, please let me know about it, because as a professor of cardiovascular pathophysiology, I've missed that one somehow. Probably because it does not exist and it never will. Okay? Good luck getting the ethics, the finances, the practicalities together, or finding anyone remotely willing to be a part of any such study. Okay, that won't be happening in your lifetime or mine, Brad. Okay, so drop it.
And strokes. But let's take a far more advanced look and really dive into detail.
But an advanced look, Brad, can only be undertaken by somebody who understands the most basic central tenets of the thing, which include the facts that the largest available associative data set on the planet tells us that lowering your cholesterol below 220 milligrams per deciliter is associated with quite precipitous increases in total mortality and mortality from every meaningful sub-cause of mortality, including heart disease. Also, it would require you to understand that statins are a dangerous contraindicated metabolic poison that you should not be prescribing to anybody under any circumstances, simply because there is no indication for them anyway. First do no harm, I believe the Hippocratic Oath says something about, and you are doing harm by prescribing statins to people. No two ways about it. You would also need to understand that cholesterol does not make your blood sticky or cause blockages in your arteries, none of which you seem to understand, so I don't know why you think you would be able to give us a more in-depth view on cholesterol and heart disease, Brad, on this basis alone so far. So far, you're getting a 0. You're not passing my class in cardiovascular pathophysiology so far, son. You'll be failing, okay? You'll be resitting the class next semester. See you then.
To understand the optimal cholesterol strategy for longevity.
The optimal strategy for longevity in terms of cholesterol, Brad, is to let it do what it's going to do. It's under the control of your genes, and your genes know what they're doing. There is a 1 in 1 million prevalence of people who have a genuine problem in this regard. The problem those people have, Brad, is that they are a complete knockout situation where they have none of the receptors for the lipoprotein transporters, and as such, their cells are unable to absorb cholesterol from the bloodstream, and that leads to serious diseases and usually very, very early death, probably in about the teenage years in those individuals. Not because the blood cholesterol is high, but because the cells are starving. Okay, what's next?
First thing to understand is that cholesterol is essential for life. It's a crucial part for our cell membranes. Yep. It gets changed into hormones such as testosterone. Yep. It's crucial for bile production so that we can absorb fat. And the list goes on.
And on and on and on, including, a very important role in the pathway that leads to vitamin D3, for example, which is an important cofactor for just about every metabolic process in the body. The fact that it makes up myelin sheathing on your neurons, for example, Brad. You really could go on all day about the roles of cholesterol. That really is absolutely vital, and the idea that we should try and reduce it for some reason is absolutely, utterly, completely ridiculous. Contraindicated, misanthropic nonsense, and you need to stop doing it.
In short, no cholesterol equals no life.
Correct. And if we look at this graph again, we can see that as we head towards lower cholesterol, the incidence of death goes up as well along the way. So it's not just a suddenly no cholesterol equals no life precipitously. There's a fairly straight line relationship there. See that? It's over here. It's pretty clear, isn't it, Brad? Okay, what's next?
Now, we've known for decades that every cell in the human body can produce its own cholesterol.
Correct. Except in that knockout situation where there's a real problem.
Organs such as the liver can produce extra cholesterol and export it to other cells that need a temporary top-up.
Yeah, put your hands in your pockets, Brad, and leave them there. It's really, really distracting when you're speaking to be waving your hands around like a maniac. Okay? Just a little hint for you.
Which means we need a transportation system to move that cholesterol from the liver, and primarily it's transported via the bloodstream. Now,
yes. Yeah, funnily enough, that's because that's the way a lot of things are transported in the body. It's the most efficient, rapid way of getting messages around the body very, very rapidly and moving nutrients and hormones and all sorts of things around the body. So what's your point?
this is a problem.
No, it isn't a problem. Our bodies have developed that way over at least 4.5 million years, Brad. We've been doing this a very, very long time. The lipoproteins that serve the role of transporting the cholesterol in the blood have developed over, 13.8 billion years, actually, at least. Those genes really, really have got this down. All of those lipoproteins exist because there is a piece of DNA that encodes for their production. Such genes being able to be nominally switched on or off, or if you like to think of it that way, the rate at which the stuff is produced goes up and down according to the physiological homeostatic needs of the body at the time, Brad. It's not a problem at all. Nonsense, once again, just rubbish.
Blood is primarily water and cholesterol repels water.
Yes, so what?
Think of trying to mix water with oil. It doesn't work and they separate out. So the body needs to package up the cholesterol into a vehicle so that it can
lipoprotein transporters.
Be transported in the blood. That vehicle is a spherical ball called a lipoprotein, with the cholesterol in the middle and the lipoprotein creating a protective layer.
It's not protective, Brad. It's to act as a solvent. Goodness me.
Outside layer can mix well with water, so now we can transport it in the blood around the body.
Amazing.
But it's during this transport that some of the cholesterol gets dumped into the blood vessel.
Nonsense. Nothing is dumped anywhere. The cells that require cholesterol sequester the ApoB containing lipoproteins on the way past, bind them up on the cell membrane, and pump as much of the cholesterol out of the lipoprotein into the cell where it's required. No problem. What is your issue? Dumped? No.
Walls leading to blockages.
No, Brad. Cholesterol does not block arteries. This is ridiculous. You're supposed to be a physician, for goodness sake. Atherosclerotic plaques block arteries, not cholesterol.
So which cholesterol vehicles or lipoproteins do we need to worry about?
None of them, Brad. I've already explained this. They all exist because they are encoded for by a length of DNA that survived 13.8 billion years. 13,800 million years is what we're talking about there, Brad. Those genes really know what they're doing.
Well, a broad simplification is that every lipoprotein has got an either ApoA tag or an ApoB tag.
Yes. So, there's a reason for that.
ApoA attaches itself to high-density lipoprotein, or HDL.
Yes.
We're going to leave this to one side because efforts to alter ApoA or HDL cholesterol, they've largely failed in terms of reducing heart attack rates.
Yeah, but the same is true of reducing any of the lipoproteins, Brad, to all intents and purposes. We'll get to that when we get to it, though.
Instead, we're going to focus on the ApoB family because it's here where the problems begin.
No, it isn't, Brad. That's false. Again. Still, if you like. ApoB is not a problem. It exists because it is encoded for by the genes. It is there to do a role, to bind to the epithelial cells where the cholesterol is required to be delivered to, and to deliver it there.
ApoB attaches itself to Lp(a), LDL, IDL, and VDL. So what am I talking about here when I mention these acronyms? LDL stands for low-density lipoprotein.
This level of detail is probably not useful for people, Brad. It's quite irrelevant, all of this.
What this is referring to is the density of the cholesterol that...
Oh, really? Low density is referring to the density of it, is it? Good, thank you, Brad.
It's packaged into that lipoprotein vehicle. But overall, the key takeaway here is that all lipoproteins that have got the ApoB tag, they can get dumped into...
No, not dumped. Wrong again. Dumped is a value judgment statement, Brad. That's nothing to do with science whatsoever. That's your ridiculous, ignorant opinion.
The blood vessel walls, and I do mean all of them. So you may have heard other people talking about small dense LDL, that is the crucial one and we can ignore...
No, neither of them cause heart disease at all, Brad.
Or the rest. That's incorrect. Again, all types of lipoproteins that have got the ApoB tag can get into the blood vessel wall.
It's almost as if that's what they're supposed to do. It's almost as if that was their design. That's why they bind to the epithelial cells in the vascular bed and deliver the cholesterol there where it's needed. Goodness me, what a shock.
We need to worry about all of them because when we do lower ApoB or LDL cholesterol, we reduce the buildup of blockages in the blood vessel.
Not true, Brad. At all. You just made a cause and effect statement there. This is an associative study. The key word there, the giveaway, is the first word, association between. See that, Brad? This is not an experiment. This is not a properly powered, properly designed, properly randomized metabolic ward lock-in study. This is an ill-disciplined associative piece of mishmash with outcome statistics which are so vastly unimpressive that I'm stunned that you've even put this up on the screen. The word there, it says the achieved absolute LDL-C level was significantly associated. That means statistically, Brad. That's got nothing to do with clinical utility whatsoever. That is a statistical statement. Okay? Significantly associated with the absolute rate of major coronary... See, rate of, not cause and effect. That's an incidence statistic, a coincidental statistic. Okay? And 1.5% lower event rate is tiny. Because it's that's a relative outcome. 1.5% lower than what, Brad? What was the baseline incidence? Do you even know? Have you even read this study so that you know what the baseline incidence was, so that we know what 1.5% of that is? Because in most of these studies, you'll find the incidence rates at baseline are somewhere around about 8 per 10,000 person years of follow-up, Brad. So 1.5% of that, you do the math for yourself, if you're even capable of doing that math for yourself. I suspect that you probably aren't. That's why you've put this up on the screen here, just because it says significantly associated with. And that was enough to fool you, Brad, because you are completely out of your depth when you're looking at scientific studies and statistical inferences. This is why you should not be making these kind of videos. This is not your area of expertise. Science and scientific inference. Okay, your area of expertise is allopathic medicine, which is not does not cover cardiovascular pathophysiology. The mere fact that you are licensed to prescribe statins doesn't mean that you are competent to do so or that you should do so. You should not do so. It is dangerous. It is contraindicated. Okay, what's next?
Vessels and reduce heart attacks.
No, there's a cause and effect statement. Reduce heart attacks. No. Wrong, Brad. False. That data from that study you've just showed does not show what you says it shows. False.
This part is crucial. When we do a blood test for cholesterol levels, we are only measuring the cholesterol that's being transported in the blood.
No, we're not even doing that, Brad. False again. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. You don't even clearly have a working knowledge of how the testing is conducted by the laboratories and what it is they're even testing. Stunning.
It's only a tiny fraction of the body's total cholesterol.
That is true. However, the first part of what you just said is not correct.
And so far, after the decades of research that we've got on cholesterol, the European Society of Cardiology recommends that LDL cholesterol levels...
Right, so an appeal to authority fallacy. This is not an experimental piece of evidence to support anything. This is a guideline. It's an opinion. It's a paid-for opinion. It's a bought opinion. This is not science, Brad. This is why you shouldn't be talking about science publicly.
Should be lowered as much as possible to prevent cardiovascular disease.
Well, that won't work because LDL does not cause cardiovascular disease.
And this is a sentiment that's echoed by the American Heart Association.
So another vapid appeal to authority fallacy statement. Another organisation stating an opinion which is also bought and paid for. Do you have any experiments to support any of the claims you've made thus far? No? Okay.
Association. Remember, all human cells can produce their own cholesterol.
Yes, you said that already.
So we only need a tiny amount that's being transported in the blood.
Where do you get that from? The amount of cholesterol that's in your blood and being transported in your blood is entirely under the control of your genes, Brad. And the way those genes are reacting to the environment in which they're placed at any given time. Such genes having survived a very, very long period of time, such genes knowing exactly what they're doing.
And the human studies prove this.
Pardon? No, they don't. False again. Absolutely false again.
So what can we do to lower ApoB lipoproteins?
We shouldn't be doing that, Brad. So the question is null and void. We absolutely should not be attempting to lower ApoB. It's under the control of your genes.
We start with exercise. We've got fantastic data showing that regular exercise can reduce cholesterol, and it does result in lower heart attack rates.
Okay, well, you just said result, which is a cause and effect statement. If I do such a study on the incidence of sunburn at beachside resorts on hot summer days and the sale of ice creams, Brad, I'll find a strong correlation, won't I? Does that mean I can reduce the incidence of sunburn by shutting down the ice cream salesman? No? It's ridiculous, of course, isn't it? Well, that's what you've got here. Now, I'm quite happy that there may well be an association between reduced incidence of heart disease and people who exercise. I'm quite happy with it. That might be the case. However, that's got nothing to do with the effect on cholesterol. Nothing whatsoever. You clearly don't even understand the basic mechanisms. This is absolutely ridiculous, Brad Stanfield. Absolutely ridiculous, nonsensical garbage from you.
The next is diet. We can see that a healthy...
All right, so now you're a nutritionist as well as a pathophysiologist, which you're not one of. So you're not a cardiovascular pathophysiologist. I am. You're not a nutritionist. I am. You're clearly not a scientist's backside, let alone someone who can understand basic scientific discipline and statistical inference of any kind, Brad. This is ridiculous. Who do you think you are? You are a doctor. Go and be a doctor. Go and maladvise, misadvise your patients if you want to. Go and follow the guidelines of the Medical Council of New Zealand if you want to, Brad, or you're mandated to, I get that. Be one of their puppets if that's what you want to spend your life doing, Brad. That doesn't put you in the right. What you're saying here is demonstrably false. And it's dangerous, contraindicated, misanthropic disinformation. You need to stop this. You need to stop doing this today.
Healthy diet that's got lots of fiber and low saturated fat can reduce LDL cholesterol.
But you don't want to do that, though. We've covered this. Shall we have a look at the chart again? Yeah, it still looks the same, doesn't it? Okay.
About 17%. Now,
17% of what? Is that relative? Is it absolute? And so what? If anything, that's contraindicated to lower cholesterol.
No single diet is perfect for everyone. So if you've found a diet that works for you, that is brilliant. But if I had to choose one diet, I'd go for the Mediterranean diet.
Doesn't exist, Brad. There are thousands of different diets consumed by all sorts of different populations of people living around the Mediterranean. What on earth are you talking about?
This is the diet that's got the best evidence for preventing major
No, prevention is a cause and effect statement, Brad. There are no experiments to underpin this claim existing anywhere in the literature. False again. Another totally incompetent statement from you there, son. No.
Vascular events. But regardless of which diet you choose, we want to make sure that it's low in saturated fat.
You want to do no such thing. That is contraindicated. That is false. Saturated fat is not even a nutrient of concern these days, even for those organisations who have been pushing this ideological claptrap that you're still spouting, Brad. There are 5 major meta-analyses available on this topic, and they all agree to all intents and purposes. There's only one that's out of line with the other 4. It is the least well-disciplined one. It's the Cochrane study, one done by Hooper and colleagues, and I think it was about 2015 from memory. It is a p-hacked study, Brad. Okay, it only just meets statistical significance, and it does that because it is p-hacked. The absolute outcome statistic is so close to nothing as makes no odds for any given living human being over a 100-year lifespan. Your assessment of this is incompetent, totally incompetent. And I say that as an absolutely competent statistician and scientist. Okay? I'm sorry about that, but those are the facts. You have this completely arse-about face.
And the evidence for this is from a Cochrane review that was published in 2020.
2020, was it? There you go. I had the date wrong, but everything else I said is correct.
It showed that by reducing saturated fat intake, we can reduce the chance of heart disease.
No, see, chance? No. Wrong. This is an associative study. Chance is a cause and effect statement. This is also not an experiment. This is not properly designed, properly powered, properly tenured, properly randomized metabolic ward lock-in study over multiple decades. There are so many confounds to this that it's a joke, and they didn't even report the relationship they actually observed. They adjusted it, Brad, which is another way of saying we fabricated our outcomes to suit the funding source, basically. Look at the author's declarations of interest there on this, by the way. You might find that interesting. And they p-hacked. This is not science, Brad. This isn't evidence for anything, except for your incompetence as someone who should be talking about science or scientific studies to a public audience. This is not your area of expertise. This is not the area in which you are competent. You are an allopathic medico. Go and do that quietly.
By 21%. We also want to make sure that
21% of what? What was the baseline incidence, Brad? Do you even know? No? I thought not.
That the diet is high in fiber.
No, that's a bad idea as well. Go and look up Dr. Paul Mason and his YouTube video about the one and only one remotely even pseudo-clinical study that's been done on this topic, which was absolutely clear and unequivocal in its findings about whether or not fiber is indicated for the enteric function of humans, Brad. You will learn something. Go and check it out. Dr. Paul Mason.
From a Cochrane review, we can see that we can lower...
well, we've seen the credibility of Cochrane reviews already there, Brad. So another one is not going to strengthen your case. And this is also not an experiment either, is it? No, this is another poorly designed, poorly disciplined, pseudoscientific piece of crack pottery. Sorry about that.
Cholesterol and LDL cholesterol with increased fiber intake.
So we don't want to reduce our cholesterol, Brad. We've covered this very clearly.
Okay, so we're using exercise and diet to lower ApoB lipoproteins.
That's a bad idea. It's under the control of your genes, Brad. Leave it to your genes.
But what if we want to take it a step further? How low do we want ApoB lipoproteins?
We want it to be exactly what our genes set it as. Because our genes know what they're doing, Brad.
To give us the best protection against heart attacks.
Protection is a cause and effect statement, Brad. Do you have any experiments to underpin a claim of protection? If so, how did you get the ethics to do these experiments on human beings over multiple decades locked in labs, Brad? Where did you get the money for such a study? How were the practicalities taken care of? And how did you find subjects that would be willing to do that? Genetically identical pairs of twins in a large number. When did you do that study, Brad? We'll wait for your response on that. We actually won't. Let's crack on. No, Brad.
Strokes. Which brings us to another interesting question. Can blood cholesterol or ApoB levels get too low?
I don't know, Brad. If only there was a data set that could inform us on the likelihood of that question.
To answer this, I want to emphasize again that the blood cholesterol levels is only a tiny fraction of the body's total cholesterol. All we're measuring is the amount of cholesterol that's being transported.
No, false. Again, Brad, it was false the first time you said that, and it's still false now. Perhaps you should go and talk to a lab technician about the test and what is actually done. You will learn something there too, son.
An important distinction because as far as the human clinical studies go, there doesn't seem to be a limit for how low we can bring our ApoB levels.
That doesn't mean we should do that, Brad. It's quite clear that we should do no such thing, especially with a dangerous contraindicated metabolic poison like HMG coenzyme reductase tablets like the ones on screen here. Just because they are allowed by the pharmacological authority here in New Zealand and in other places around the world as well, that doesn't mean that they are safe. That doesn't mean that they are indicated. Neither do the bought and paid for studies that have been published show any such thing either, Brad, actually. There is no evidence that these drugs are beneficial in any way. There is no evidence of extension of lifespan in a general population, nor is there any evidence of reduction in cardiovascular events other than secondary events, and only then in men over 65. And that's because of the serendipitous anti-inflammatory effect of the statin medication. It's got nothing whatsoever to do with cholesterol. Please go and study the pharmacology of the things. Okay, you'll learn something there as well, Brad, probably.
For example, when we use a class of medication called statins to bring down our blood cholesterol levels, contrary to all of the noise that's on social media,
put your hands in your pockets, Brad, and keep them there when you're presenting.
That's based on outdated data, this strategy is very safe. The rates of
No, it isn't, Brad. There's nothing safe about poisoning your mitochondria, and that is what you are doing with statins. There is nothing safe about lowering your cholesterol level for the various effects that it has in the body. Nothing safe at all about that. Safe is a very interesting word, Brad. Safe implies no risk of a problem. Okay, and there are no studies to show that there are no risks associated with statins at all. There are bought and paid for studies. There is criminal underreporting of side effects. There's also no evidence of benefit. Ergo, the intervention is not warranted. First, do no harm, Brad. I think you'll find that's somewhere in the Hippocratic Oath. Okay, go and look that thing up. See what that one says.
Muscle aches are almost the same. There's no association with cognitive impairment, and it actually looks like statins may help protect against.
Again, protect is a cause and effect statement. There is no evidence to support that ridiculous claim existing anywhere in the literature, Brad. False.
cognitive decline, and they do not affect male testosterone levels. The one study that's often mentioned by people that refute the idea of lowering LDL cholesterol or ApoB lipoproteins is this one. In 2020, an observational study of over 100,000 people.
How about one that's got over 1 billion, Brad?
Showed that low levels of LDL cholesterol seem to be associated with an increased risk of death. So,
not risk, no, association, Brad. So you still don't seem to get this one through your head. These studies are associative.
If LDL cholesterol is bad, surely a lower level should reduce death rates, but that's not what the study showed.
There you go. So LDL is not bad. Great, can we move on? Perhaps we can stop trying to intervene and leave our genes do what they're supposed to. That'd be an idea, wouldn't it?
What's going on here? This can be explained by reverse causation.
Don't be so absolutely ridiculous, Brad. That is the most fundamentally anti-science thing I have ever heard. It's absolutely, totally ridiculous. Completely without any foundation whatsoever. Just nuts to suggest such a thing. Wow.
So debilitation and illness, they do cause a decrease in cholesterol levels. And
it's almost as if the cholesterol is being drained by the body trying to repair itself. It's almost like cholesterol is there for a purpose, to repair bodies. And because, I mean, did you understand, for example, Brad, that 50% of every membrane of every one of the several trillion cells in your body is cholesterol? So if you've got a body that's badly damaged for some reason, it will drag cholesterol levels down because your body will struggle to synthesize sufficient of it. That does not remotely prove your case that cholesterol is bad. Okay? If anything, it suggests the absolute opposite, doesn't it? If you're actually thinking for 1 second in your ridiculous life. Okay, let's move on.
In the study, the people that had other sicknesses, they had lower levels of LDL cholesterol.
Yeah, for the reasons I've just spoken about.
So instead, the data that we should be looking at is interventional studies.
Well, show us one, Brad, of pairs of genetically identical twins, a large number of pairs of twins for statistical power, separated at birth, locked in separate labs, separate identical labs with identical conditions in every way, shape and form, and have those people brought up from birth and kept in those labs until death, treating those people exactly the same throughout their life in every way, except for the one thing that you're trying to pin some cause and effect statement on here, and then we'll have something to talk about, Brad. Good luck getting the ethics and the practicalities and the money together to do that, and finding some people that will be willing to be a part of that, to give up their lives, basically, their whole lives. You ridiculous boy. This is nuts. You're completely out of your lane here. You think you're not because you're an allopathic medico. All that means is that you are licensed to prescribe dangerous poisons to people, dangerous, completely contraindicated poisons, Brad. It doesn't mean you're educated on this topic. It's absolutely clear and patent you're not. From everything you've said in this video, it is so clear that you don't know anything about this that it's laughable. Wow, what's next?
As in, what happens when we purposely make a change to lower cholesterol levels, and in those studies, we see lower heart attack rates.
No, we don't particularly. At all. There's nothing meaningful in any of the statistics that are on that page there. There is a statistical significance, but it has nothing to do with clinical significance whatsoever. Look at this, 1.5% lower event rate. 1.5% lower than what? What was the baseline incidence? Brad, do you even know? I bet you don't. It wouldn't surprise me at all if you don't even know what the baseline event rate was. I'll help you out. It's probably around about 8 events per 10,000 person years of follow-up. What's 1.5% of that? You can do the math on that perhaps, Brad, and tell me how vastly meaningfully important that is. And it's not cause and effect because it's not controlled. It's associative. Okay, we're done. What's next?
And lower death rates.
No. It's associative, Brad, and it's weak at best.
So what's the best ApoB level?
Well, it's the one that your genes set for your body because they know what they're doing, Brad. We've covered that.
Well, this is what Dr. Peter Attia had to say.
All right, so another appeal to authority from somebody who's equally vapid, clearly. Does Peter Attia have any studies? Does he have any experimental work that he's done on genetically identical twins that have been locked in labs for their lifespans, Brad? No, he doesn't either? Oh, okay. Well, let's hear from Peter Attia anyway, shall we?
You want ApoB to be as close to the level as it was when you were born.
No, you don't, Peter Attia. That's absolutely ridiculous. That's nonsense. You want nothing of the sort. What you want is your genes to control the level of ApoB in your blood because they know what they're doing.
So we start developing heart disease when we're born.
All right, so that destroys your logic right there, doesn't it? You start developing ApoB when you're born, and yet you're saying you want the level of ApoB that you have when you're born. Well, which is it, Peter? Do you see the hole in your logic here at all? Other than the obvious, which is that ApoB does not cause heart disease.
That's just the way it is.
No, it really isn't. Saying that's just the way it is doesn't make it so, Peter. It's not so.
The autopsy studies make this abundantly clear.
Yes, we know that children start to develop atherosclerosis soon after birth, I should say, these days. But that's got nothing to do with ApoB, Peter.
Tell me you want to live to be 100, you're going to need to keep your ApoB below 30 milligrams per deciliter.
Absolute nonsense. There is no evidence anywhere in the literature to support that claim. That is a ridiculous, vapid opinion by someone who clearly has no idea at all what he's talking about, or any idea of what science even is. It's ridiculous.
That's a really low number.
And it's also ridiculous and unsupported by science in any way.
And I 100% agree with it.
Which makes you equally ridiculous, Brad, and equally incompetent to speak publicly about what the science is able to show us. Because you have totally misrepresented the science in this video from start to finish. Goodness, you couldn't even get the basic fundamentals right. You said that cholesterol makes your blood sticky. No, it doesn't. You said cholesterol blocks your arteries. No, it doesn't. You said ApoB is a problem. No, it isn't. You said all ApoB carrying lipoproteins are problematic for heart disease. No, they're not. You said statins are safe. Again, no, they're not, Brad. Wrong. Nothing you have said has been correct in this video. Nothing at all. Wow.
There's no known risks for bringing ApoB levels down as low as possible. And unfortunately...
Yeah, but there's no indication that you should do it either. And just because a risk isn't known very well or established very well doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, Brad. And the Hippocratic Oath requires you to first do no harm. And by prescribing poison, you are doing harm. How about the fact that you have gone completely over your lane and you have given people advice on diet, something which you are not remotely qualified to do? You are an allopathic physician. You are not trained in nutrition or physiology or science or statistics or statistical inference or pharmacology, clearly, or cardiovascular pathophysiology, patently. You are licensed to push an ideology on an unsuspecting public who think that because you hold an MD certificate that you know what you're talking about. Well, I'm going to have to disabuse your adoring public of that notion, Brad. It's not true. Brad Stanfield does not know what he's talking about. Not at all, clearly.
Diet and exercise alone are not going to get us to this target.
It's not a target. You don't want to do it. It's an error. It's a stupid thing to even attempt to do.
Patients that I see in the clinic who want to do everything that they can to live over 100 and live healthily, then I talk with them about cholesterol-lowering medications.
Well, then you're leading them up the garden path, Brad, because that's not the answer. Cholesterol is not the problem, so it's not the answer either.
Including statins, ezetimibe, and PCSK9 inhibitors.
Goodness me. None of those are dangerous contraindicated poisons. None of those are chemical shitstorms in any way, are they, Brad? All bought and paid for, this allopathic, contraindicated dangerous advice here. All bought and paid for by the drug companies, boys and girls.
I also want to emphasize that it's not just cholesterol that we need to worry about for our blood vessel.
We don't need to worry about cholesterol at all. There are many factors that are involved, most likely in the causation of atherosclerosis heart disease, Brad, and cholesterol is not one of them. Sorry about that.
Health. We need to control blood sugar levels,
yes.
blood pressure,
yes,
stress,
yes,
minimal amount of alcohol, and
yes,
no smoking.
Yes.
It's not just one factor that contributes to poor blood vessel health.
Yes.
It's many. And
that's right, and none of them are cholesterol, or ApoB protein, or low-density lipoprotein. Those are not factors in heart disease. Okay.
We need to address all of them. Now I want to address some myths that I often see in my YouTube comment sections. As a long-time keto person, my LDL is very high, but my HDL is also high and triglycerides are low, so I assume that I'm fine.
That's not an assumption you can make. None of those things are necessarily problematic, neither are they necessarily so-called protective. They are not indicators of your likelihood of any health outcome, good or bad, actually. None of them are.
Depends what your goals are. If you're trying to reach over 100 years of age and do that healthily, then you're probably not on the optimal strategy.
Brad, you're not competent to make a statement around that, because everything you have to say on that topic regarding cholesterol is demonstrably false, is flawed, is fundamentally incorrect and unsupported by science. Sorry about that.
We want to try and reduce LDL cholesterol.
We want to do no such thing, Brad. No, we don't.
And ApoB.
No, false again. We don't want to do that either.
Next comment says that there's two types of LDL, and it's the small, dense LDL that's dangerous.
No, that's false. There are no dangerous LDLs. LDLs are not the cause of heart disease.
This is incorrect. Like we've gone through, all of the lipoproteins that have got the ApoB tag can get into the blood vessel wall.
It's almost as if that's what they're supposed to do. It's almost as if we've covered that earlier in the video and Brad still doesn't understand. Yeah, okay, so we can move on. This is just nonsense, Brad. Just absolute, rancid, excremental, pustulous nonsense from you.
This includes all types of LDL.
So no, it doesn't. In terms of risk of anything or problem of any kind. False.
We need to address all of it.
No, we don't. What we need to address is the incompetence of the medical fraternity in the way that they are communicating with the public about this issue. There needs to be a disconnect between the source of funding that you guys get from the pharmaceutical companies, and don't deny it. Some. We weren't born yesterday. I certainly wasn't. Okay? It's got to stop. This nonsense has to stop, Brad. This is unacceptable, misanthropic, disinformation. This is dangerous garbage. You've got to stop doing this.
Comment addresses statin side effects, where they say, I've tried 4 different statins and always experienced side effects.
So not someone with a great learning curve then, clearly. You probably deserve what you get in that case.
I have genetically high cholesterol, but...
So? Your genes know what they're doing.
But my coronary calcium scan is 0. So that's...
It's good. It suggests that there's no advanced atherosclerosis.
Awesome to hear that your scan shows that there's no calcium buildup. But just keep in mind that the coronary artery calcium scores, they can't measure non-calcified plaque.
So?
You might want to consider other types of cholesterol-lowering medication.
No, because cholesterol does not cause plaques, Brad. That will not assist. That is not indicated. Wrong again.
Such as ezetimibe or PCSK9 inhibitors. The next one says statins don't really make a difference to cholesterol.
Well, they really do, but you don't want to do that.
And they shut off the CoQ10 pathway.
They don't shut it off, they downregulate it, which is absolutely, completely contraindicated.
There are multiple human studies showing that statins, they do robustly reduce blood cholesterol levels.
Yes, which is contraindicated. Apparently.
This also matches my clinical practice, where when I prescribe a statin to a patient, I can see significant reductions in their cholesterol levels.
Yes, which is contraindicated.
There's also been multiple studies looking at CoQ10 supplementation with statins.
So what? What's that got to do with the price of fish in China in 1965?
And there's no benefit seen.
That doesn't mean that the coenzyme Q10 status hasn't been compromised by the statins, Brad. That might mean that the person's ability to absorb oral supplementation of coenzyme Q10 is not what it should be. This is ridiculous, son. This really is completely unacceptable from you. For a start, as a medical professional, you ought to confine your commentary to your patients. And you ought to give them better advice than you are giving them. That's my opinion. And I'm well and truly qualified to give one. I know you're mandated to behave a certain way by the Medical Council of New Zealand. I understand that. That doesn't mean that you should be doing it. And you certainly should not be making public videos about any aspect of medicine as a doctor. That's not your role. That's not your role at all. You're completely out of your lane here. And it's completely unacceptable what you're doing. Please stop it. Right. You know the drill. Don't let the door hit you in the arse on the way out. Join me next time when someone else will be wrong on the interwebs. Frankly, see you then.